we can come to, and now we're just moving little pieces around and not really doing anything because the current state of the manuscript tradition can't get us any closer than we are. So all you can really do now is start to exegete the variants to see if you can, in essence, do some mind reading. Arguably, to this day, his still most popular scholarly work is called The Orthodox Corruption of Scripture. And what that has allowed him to do is to pretend that he can get in the mind of scribes that lived 15 to 1900 years ago. And go, well, this was the great controversy of the day, so this person must have been thinking that. The fact of the matter is, you don't know what any scribe was thinking. No one can mind read someone from that far away. Unless they provided a marginal note, the reason that they messed up or made a mistake could have absolutely nothing to do with any type of theological concern or anything else. They just might have had an argument with their best friend that day and they're distracted. They might have had a really bad cold, their sinuses were going, their eyes were watering, and they just couldn't see well. You just don't know. It is a fool's errand to try to become, what was the Johnny Carson thing where he'd stick the Karnak, the textual critic. That's what, Karnak, the textual critic. You just stinking don't know, okay? You just don't know. And Augustine didn't know either. We'll mention that a little bit later on. So if it is impossible to know what they were thinking, then how can you even talk about recognizing scribal errors? Well, because there are common errors of vision and common errors of hearing that we continue to make to this day. Words that have similar sounds to them. For example, in English, there's all sorts of words that are pronounced the same but have completely different meanings. Light, L-I-G-H-T, can be that stuff up there that's coming down from the ceiling. It can be something that is not heavy. L-I-T-E is another, textual criticism. Light. There's all sorts of different ways that you can understand that. And it's one of the reasons English is a difficult language for people from another language to learn, because we have so many of these terms and so many different spellings and all sorts of stuff like that. And so if you're writing something down that someone is reading, it's very easy, especially if you're doing it for a lengthy period of time, to see how substitutions could be made and errors of hearing could take place. But most early copying wasn't done in scriptoriums. There were some that were, but especially during periods of persecution, it would be more likely that it would be errors of sight. And there was always a period of time when one person would just be copying another manuscript called your exemplar. So you're copying from your exemplar, and there are errors of sight that we continue to make to this very day. It's a little bit easier now, cutting and pasting. Though, have you ever missed the first letter or the first word of a cut and paste because you didn't realize that your selection had started wrong? Or you missed the last part because your selection didn't go all the way down there. You didn't notice it. You thought it was all selected, but didn't. So things like that can still happen. But back in my day, when I was writing papers in high school and college, I got my first computer about halfway through college. You'd have you'd have to have a book out, and you open it up, and you put it over here by the side, and you're doing this number, and you have to go back here, check what you did. Of course, you're writing on an IBM Selectric, so you're having to get your whiteout out, or your correction paper, or whatever else it is when you make a mistake. You got stuff like that going on. There's lots of things to distract you, and in the process, your eye has to keep going back and forth to the exemplar. And so let me change over here to something else so you can see what it is I'm talking about here. I have to get this off of that screen because it's going to get confused. And I don't want it to be confused. Uh-oh. Did that work? No, I didn't think that it did. Boom. That should work. And boom. Okay. So, what would frequently happen is one of the most common most common scribal errors was called homoiteleuton. Homoiteleuton. Similar endings. And it happens in English if you had the term education, ends with T-I-O-N, and in the same line you have relocation. That's just location. Education and location. Both end with T-I-O-N. And as you're copying, you look over and you see, what? Dan Wallace doesn't think errors of hearing occurred? Well, of course they occurred. Why? How else in the world could you have all the different humon and hamon in 1 John 1? There's everyone I've ever heard understands they were both pronounced the same way. Anyway, you look over and you just type T-I-O-N. Your eye sees T-I-O-N, and you continue on. The problem is the T-I-O-N you've seen is later in the line from the T-I-O-N you just typed. And as a result, everything in between is gone. Now, unless you're paying really close attention, and sometimes the sentence will still make sense, so it doesn't necessarily catch your attention. But that's called homoiteleuton, similar endings. Well, let me show you how that worked in 1 John 3:1. And remember something. This is something a lot of people just don't grasp and understand. You're worrying me out there. I mean, you're running into the other room to cough up a lung. You only have two. So, just move along. Okay, all right. You need to understand that for the first 900 years of the New Testament's copying in Greek, it was written in majuscule text, which sometimes called unsealed text, though unsealed actually has a technical meaning that wouldn't always fit. But anyway, all capital forms